Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Shelley. I am an alcoholic. It's an honor to be speaking in Malibu. I've always admired California, meaning I'm from Brooklyn. And, the Beach Boys inspired me to come here. And when I was trying to get sober, I was over my mother's house because my home was gone already. And it was by a different smoke that happens over here in Los Angeles or Malibu. And I was sitting in front of this little tiny TV, and I see this yellow smog. And people are walking around with like masks. It says, I like to live there. And here I am. But when we came to LA, you know, when the Malibu fires were going on, I wondered why people want to live in a place that's so fireproof, you know. And the people whose homes were burned, they say because we like the excitement, you know. And I said, wow, these people must be after my own heart. Probably alcoholics. And this is the stuff, like the gentleman that had 20 years that shared how he understood things, and that's my understanding of the world, you know. I sometimes don't understand things properly, and I was impressed with the guy that took a 14-year cake, because February 7th I'll be 14, and I'm looking forward to that date. Wow. So let me see what I could tell you about myself. Yeah. What it was like, I come from a very nice home, okay? That has nothing to do with what was wrong with me. I didn't know anything was wrong with me till I went to a Christmas party and I had 7 Harvey Wallbangers. And the effect produced by the 7 Harvey Wallbangers was something that my father told me, that you know, he had had a drunk and he never touched alcohol again, and by all rights, I should be careful of that. And the second time I drank, I found myself at a party, passed out. And the man that ended up being my husband, Jaime, was at the foot of the bed. He says, nothing happened, you're okay. And so I've had 2 experiences with alcohol. I should have just seen something was up, but I never thought anything of it. So life goes on, and I have a business next to a bar, of course, and I happen to frequent the bar more often than stay in my own business. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, the cab will come and pick me up and bring me home to my small child. It was only an infant, and I don't think anything's wrong with my life. So I liked Billy, man. He was so cool. He told it how it was. And him and I kind of drank the same amount, but I would go for the gallon, you know, like I didn't have time to go twice a day, you know, get my booze. Way too much, you know, it was pop-off. And very imaginative, you know, I didn't want the liquor store guy to know what was going on, you know, I only had a cold and I needed the brandy, and, you know, but I would try to not frequent the same liquor stores all over, you know, at the same time, at the same, you know, same time, same place, but I needed my booze. And when my booze ran out in the middle of the night, I'd go to the park and look for empty cans of beer, you know, I didn't care what was in them. And so alcohol caught up with me, you know. It was 20 years. And when I started drinking, you know, I started drinking and I did a lot of coke, and I thought I had it going on because I was a size 7 with French jeans with laces on the side and these spike heels and see-through blouses, and Coke spoon, you know, with a skull walking up and down Kings Highway with a, you know, in a Cadillac. was a white Cadillac with that beautiful color green, celery green was magnificent. And I had it going on, and, you know, that's how it was. And by the time it was ended, you know, I had no teeth. 98 pounds. You know, could barely walk. So I lived in a shelter. One day my husband came home, and he smelled in the shelter. He came home. Could you imagine this? And he says, "What's the odor here?" I said, "I think my stomach ruptured." He says, "Don't you think we should call the ambulance?" He says, "Well, go ahead and call the ambulance." And, you know, called the ambulance, and, you know, the stench left because I left. And he left me in the hospital for dead because I didn't even think I'd make it back. I had no desire to live anymore. Alcohol had beaten me a sense of reasonableness that, you know, like, the reasonableness was that this is way bigger than I could have imagined or get myself out to, so I might as well, like, pass on. But, you know, even though they all had these robes around me, and they had me, like, with masks in a room, you know, by myself, I was so out of it that I would watch, you know, like, if you put on your TV, you know, you have a screen, but when you don't, you've got this line going zzz. I'd watch that a whole day. It was like a meditation. Today I would think it was a meditation, but then that's all I had home for me. My husband came to see me, and, you know, he left me there for dead. And if you ever hear his story, he'll tell you the same thing, so I'm not making it up. So I didn't know what was wrong with me, like, you know, so I got out of there. My mother took me in, and then I started therapy, you know, had this great idea, maybe a therapist could help me, and basically I wanted the anxiety. I'd go around people's heads that says, "Your head is hot as mine," you know, I could cook eggs on it, you know, fried eggs or stuff. That's how hot it was. And my mother was so kind. She'd sit with me at the dining room table, and we tried to play bridge, so I would remember the numbers. And every, like, 10 minutes, I'd have to jump in the shower because I couldn't take the heat. And so I tried the therapy, and I tell the therapist, you know, I can't go through with this. I said, "There's a liquor store across the street. I got to go in there before I come here." She says, "Just don't go in," you know. And then she says, "Do you think you're an alcoholic?" I said, "Just recreationally." So I was not armed with facts about anything, you know, like, she says, "What's wrong with this?" You know, I'm kind of 40 years old, you know, I had a nice home, lots of businesses. My husband's in the street, I got a son, I don't know. I said, "I don't know what's wrong with me, to tell you the truth, you know, maybe we could figure out." And then she starts with when I was a child, and I said, "Oh, this is not gonna cut it. Just to get a little Thorazine, I'm not going through this." And I'm not stupid, you know, I know where to get good drugs, but not for Thorazine. I ain't coming up here every couple of days. So, my mother, she says, "Well, that didn't work." I said, "No. You know, my mother is, well, we're Jewish, of course, being from Brooklyn. You're either Jewish, Italian, or Irish, one of the three, you know. You know, my mother, she had this faith. She survived the Holocaust. And anything she had a problem with, she says, you know, God's going to worry." And, like, I'm looking at her and say, "How do you come to that belief system? You know, like, whatever, God, you know, like God." And one day I said, "You know that split second of hopelessness? Split second." I said, "God help me." And it worked. And I started looking through the yellow pages, and I got to go to a meeting. You know, I went to a meeting. I was, like, happy. Like, people that I remember on the street, you know, they were there, and they were all clean, and they're talking about going on a vacation. I said, wow. You know, I used to go on vacations. I haven't been on one for so long. And, you know, and I heard hope. And I started going to meetings, and life got better. But with me, I'd stand by the door, and I'd say, "Has anybody seen Jaime? You know, Jaime's out under the boardwalk. He's still alive." All the newcomers, you know, I was like a couple of days sober. They said, "Yeah, Jaime's still there." And one day, Jaime showed up, and life got better because Jaime was my husband. We'll be married 33 years in March. So don't tell me about relationships in Alcoholics Anonymous. So there comes Jaime, and the Shylock gave us money. We got an apartment. We didn't have to pay back with interest because he was honest. And we got an apartment next to the sober couple. And what they did with us is they took us to meetings every day. We started in the meetings at 12 o'clock at noon, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Houston and Varick, if you're ever in Manhattan, you got meetings starting at 6 o'clock and they're still there. So this is the cycle that started with us, because basically you couldn't leave us alone. You know, like it was like, we'd get lost, you know. We were like so out of it, so out of it. You know, like I'd identify, my name is Shelley and I'm cross-addicted, you know. No idea of what's wrong with me till, you know. And, you know, so things got better. I had an apartment that I mean, like I'd never even touched anything in that place. The way the previous owners left it, that's the way I lived. You know, like I wouldn't even rinse a dish. I'd go next door to eat because I could not handle anything. I was like, whew. I picture myself in a nightgown in a wheelchair, and that's how I like to function, you know, but that was impossible. So, you know, in that state, I had to drink one more time. And I drank one more time, and like, this bottle was the bottle that really did it. You know, it's like, it was the same bottle that I've drank so many times before. It was red with the crown, the Smirnoff, you know. And when I got that bottle, I just gulped it. I just gulped it. And I was so happy to have it. And then like somebody couldn't deal with me and they dropped me home, and I just laid in bed and I drank it. And there was this much left, and I put it underneath the bathroom sink. And when my husband came home, he didn't know what had happened, because what had happened to me from that bottle of alcohol was what actually had to happen for me to understand that I had a disease and that I couldn't stay away from alcohol on my own. And I experienced the 4 terrors. I experienced that I couldn't crawl to the bathroom to get that little left piece out of it, that little liquid that I needed so badly. And my husband said, just turn over and go to sleep. And in the car, I was begging for alcohol, and the guy that took me to the hospital says, just shut up and drink your orange juice. And I didn't know I was craving alcohol. See, I had no idea why I drank those large amounts of alcohol. So, you know, I move up the story. I move up the story because that was my last drunk. And I'm not above ever having to drink again, because I know my condition is of the hopeless variety. And I really believe that. And I have proof. So we got lucky. We came to LA and we met a bunch of people, you know, like everybody meets a bunch of people, you know, this was the right type of people. These, you know, like finally, wow. We met people that knew what was wrong with us, you know, like gave us an identification. They were, because I used to hear recoveries in the first 164 pages, and like, you're not somebody, what is recovery? You know, I really didn't want all those yadros I used to wash in the middle of the night back. You know, like that seemed way too much problem for me. Or the accessories I had to just get through life. Recovery, I didn't understand what it was, but I found out that my mind would have different thoughts, and I was kind of happy about that. Because I was afraid to close my eyes. Smirnoff, Red Label, would always be staring back at me. So I hooked up. And I got lucky. This lady was not, you know, if you want what we have, and I could go into like all these little stories I have about the different sponsors I had, and this lady was Greek, she was not Jewish, which was probably to both of our advantages. She had no kids. She hadn't been married. She didn't know about anything except alcohol. And we, you know, we opened up the big book, and we started with a set-aside prayer. I'm from the people that set aside everything they think they know, you know. Because I didn't know anything, but I was afraid I'd know the wrong thing. So I wanted God to set aside everything I thought I knew about myself and about this disease for an open mind and new experience. And it worked, because in the doctor's opinion, I saw I had a phenomenal craving to alcohol. So that's what it was. I didn't know. I thought, like, I accused this man of raping me just to get back at him. And that's why I thought I drank in a chair for 2 years, you know. So I didn't understand that I drank in that chair to satisfy phenomenal craving, and I really had no choice over that. That I had to sit in that chair till alcohol was done with me. And, you know, that made a lot of sense. And, you know, the type of mind that I have is, so you know, like the book likes to tell you the different types of thought patterns you have, and basically my thought pattern is, hey, give me a drink. You know, like, I don't need anything else. Or it doesn't even say anything, you know. That was devastating. I couldn't rely on my mind. And you know, like, wow, this is the greatest asset I've ever had. You know, it's such, I've cultivated it. You know, like, I'm a mind worshiper. So it's not good anymore. You know, it's like a phenomenal craving, the mind you can't trust, you're irritable, restless, discontent, full of fear, having trouble with personal relationships. I can't make a living. I had my own business downtown, you know, Santee Street, that near the alley, and I paid a lot of rent for this little wall I rented, and I'd walk away in the middle of the afternoon, just wander around. Useless, couldn't be of real help to anybody, you know, like, I had nothing going for me. At a year sober, I take 22 cakes, and I'm not doing very well, so that's when it came to me that the sponsor that I went a little bit forward. So the sponsor that I had, the real sponsor, she caught me when I took a year cake. And then I heard that if I would have to stay around for another year, I'd feel as good as I did by taking those 22 cakes. And I knew that I could not do that. So it started out with a set-aside prayer because I just couldn't take it. And, you know, living in LA, which was really nice, better than, you know, back in Brooklyn, and people are kind to you, and you're starting to have some people in your life consistent a little bit, and in the doctor's opinion, I got to see a phenomenal craving, and then the mental, you know. In the beginning, you may have a mental obsession, but afterwards, you know, I wonder if it's just you go for it, because you got to have alcohol. So as I said, my diagnosis wasn't any too good. So I came to believe that there would be something greater than me that could, like, straighten this mess out. And I did want a new mind, because in our triangle, it says body, mind, and spirit, and recoveries in the first 164 pages, and you're promised a new mind. And I was looking forward to that. And it was a slow process. It was like seeing that my life the way it was, you know, kind of selfish and self-centered, was of no good to anyone except me. That maybe in this drama of life that's going to come on, that I'm going to have a force greater than me that's going to direct me. And that power was going to be my employer, because I did want to make a living. I did want to pay that guy I was renting a wall from all that money, but I did want to make a living so I would be able to support ourselves and pay my rent on time, because my rent, when I was newly sober, would get paid in the middle of the month. And the landlord would call from Chicago, Mrs. Campbell, what about the rent? I said, it's on the way, Jerry. And I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I couldn't make any changes on my own. So, you know, they say, like, what's that? You know, after you take your third step, it's time to make an inventory. So, like, I wrote all the mess of my life down. I columnized, you know, columns. Cause, name, cause, how it affected in my part. And I was willing to look at it. I was willing to write a fear inventory and a sex inventory, and I was willing to have this poor lady read it. And I could swear, like, wow. I dragged my ass to her house, and I'd say, this is not working. And we smoked cigarettes, drank coffee, and ate pizza, and the plants started wilting because there was so much smoke in her apartment. And I got through it, you know, and like when I finished my fifth step, like, you know, it's like an honor, like you've graduated for something, you know, like, wow, she just did her fifth step, be gentle around her. The first thing I want to do is call Jaime. Jaime! She says, quiet, quiet. And like, so stuff started happening, you know, like I started seeing sparkles. I could look people in the eye, you know, I could walk, I could be alone, you know, I'd be afraid to be alone. Always the TV, the radio, food in the mouth, and a cigarette. And a Diet Coke or something. And it wasn't that intense anymore. And you know, I had an experience with a sixth step, and I had an experience with a seventh step. And then I made amends, you know, like I had a list of people harmed, and you know, it was a pretty long list. I was shoplifting a lot, you know, these pounds of filet mignon, you know, like what else you gonna do? You're running out of money, you can't go to work, you know, gotta do something, you know, like. That was the cool thing, that I was willing to make the amends. And, well, you know, I made amends to my brother, and it took a while for my brother and I to get hooked up. I'll tell you a little bit about it. You know, like there was the movie Star Wars, and McDonald's was giving out Beanie Babies, you know. My brother came to visit. So what my brother and I did is, you know, he would run around buy the Star Wars things, and, you know, I'd run around with him and buy the Beanie Baby things. You know, these little Beanie Babies for $1.99 at McDonald's, and buy all these hamburgers, and we'd be feeding homeless people. And I'd have the Beanie Babies, and he'd have his Star Wars figurines, and we would be, yeah. And we bonded. You know, it's it. That's all it took. I watched Inspector Gadget last night, the second one. And I remembered seeing Inspector Gadget previously. I paid money to go see it in the movie theater. I like movies like that. And I got the Inspector Gadget. I bought all the pieces to put him together. As a gift, I sent it to him. So, well, of course, he had his own, and I gave him mine. So today I called him and says, listen, you know, I just watched the movie. Did they ever make a figurine of Inspector Gadget too? He says, no, they didn't. That's the type of relationship we have. You know, it's like, it took something like Beanie Babies and Star Wars. You know, my husband and I went to see Star Wars at 5 o'clock in the morning in Westwood just to feel a part of. We wanted to do something, you know, that like to feel a part of, like people were doing all kinds of strange things. And we, you know, took our pillow and we went. At 7:30, we were ready for breakfast. It was exciting. So, you know, my mother, you know, like I always accused her of liking my brother better, you know, and my inventory said I was all crap. I got to visit her for 80th birthday. I mean, check this out. We flew to Brooklyn, New York City. I know this guy who knows the guy who knows the guy put us up in a motel that I used to admire people, that the Italian people always just have those banquets. And here we are in Sheepshead Bay in this motel, you know. I said, wow. You know, like that word, we arrived. I wanted to rent a Cadillac car because we'd ridden Cadillacs. And there was a Cadillac with a Cadillac emblem. And as a joke, while we were pulling out of the parking lot, my husband says to the attendant, can you please check that emblem? Because the shopping cart that he had a Cadillac emblem. And we were just roaring. We were ecstatic. And I got to see my brother, my son, our son, my mother, and we had the best 2 days. My son, he's on his own. After he was 14, you know, he lived with my mother while whatever the hell had to happen to me to come out on this side. And first thing we did is we went to have dim sum. I didn't know they had like Chinatown in Brooklyn now, and then we were walking, and then we went out for dinner, this Brazilian restaurant, you know, somewhere, you know, they come with these skewers full of meat, and there we were like basking in the sunlight. We were like so excited to be all together, you know. And this is the kid, you know, that kind of raised himself. When I saw him, like the first time when I was sober, I said, so where did you get your good manners? He said, you know, we used to watch Dynasty. I said, oh, yeah. So the reason I told you this story is because in my mother's living room, my mother, when I made amends to her, you know, I had to make it in Yiddish, you know. It was interesting. And I basically told her that I wasn't the daughter she raised me up to be. And, you know, my mother's cool. So what I thought I would do is, you know, I'd be a little nice to her. I'd send her pictures of me so she would see that I was doing all right. And they're in the living room, you know, she's got all the pictures. And my brother says, you see, she likes you better. I said, you know what? I sent her the pictures so she sees that I'm alive and not dead the way she thought I'd end up. And my brother says, I know. And this is a result of amends. So you're wondering why you make amends. You know, it's important. I don't mind making amends. You know, I've gotten slapped. I've done the work many times, and this time through the work, you know, I had this friend that was supposedly my best friend. I called her, and when I made amends to her, My God, she let me have it. She told me exactly what I had done to her. And it's the first time somebody had the balls to say that to me, you know, what I did to them. And it hurt for 2 weeks, and then the pain left. And then I emailed this other lady in Israel who I invited her to be my guest. I was very rude to her as she was my guest. And she had the same stuff to say to me as I just experienced 2 weeks later, but it didn't hurt anymore, because I got to admit that is me. So in sobriety, I'm Mrs. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde, you know, but it's way less, you know. The more spiritually fit I get, you know, I become, or I get to be, or God makes me up to be, is, you know, the less I experience those two personalities that like to come up. And you get to practice step 10. And it says that when you harm someone, you could clean it up. You can directly change your thinking to what God would have you be. Or when selfishness crops up, you could ask God to remove it. I mean, I've had those experiences, like in the middle of the, you know, like before going to sleep, I'm like so full of selfish thinking that I'm so sick of myself, and I'll just scream, God, take it, and it's gone, you know. I could just go to sleep. And sought to pray and meditation, proof of conscious contact with God as we understood Him. That used to scare the hell out of me, because, you know, you got to admit that something has happened to you. You know, like if you recoil from alcohol as a hot flame and you know you didn't do it, you know, like that's pretty heavy. You know, like you got to take credit for what happened to you, because that's what I was seeking. I was seeking a power that would allow me to stay sober. And with that comes responsibility, and I'm not always good at it. I sometimes take credit for it, I sometimes ignore it, I sometimes trash it. But in reality, I give it credit for what it's done for me. And, you know, I've learned to like sit still, I've learned to be able to close my eyes. I started chanting on beats. That was a picnic and a half. You know, incense, sage, you know, like, wow, it's LA, you know. I bought little lavender books about meditation, you know. So I had fun with it. You know, the basic thing is I like to sit at my dining room table. But, you know, we live in a little house now, in the ghetto, I call it. Yeah, you could just go cop drugs right on the corner if you want to, you know, but I don't even see it. You know, Ivy tells me, look, they're selling drugs over there. And you got these Mexican trucks coming around with the ding-a-ling-a-ling and the fruit, you know. It's fun. The corner's alive, you know. And when I look out my window, I've planted nice trees and plants so I could look at them, and that's nature. And I love sitting at the dining room table, and I started like burning sage now. Because last Saturday night, you know, I was sneezing so badly. So the thing is get up, burn some sage, and I stopped sneezing. So I'm back into burning sage now. It's great. But you know, it's something. So you wonder why I talk about this stuff. Well, I have a little more water here. So I could sponsor people. So I have stories to tell. And the sponsorship department is interesting, you know. It's like you go to a meeting and you could like wheel them in, you know. I used to be as hopeless as you one day, you know, a long time ago, you know. And like whatever the hell, you know, like I was at a meeting and I'm telling this girl, what are you picking that wall for? There's nothing there, you know. She asked me to sponsor her because she thought like that's so courageous. But that, you know, that's just me. I pass people notes in a meeting. My husband thinks I'm trying to pick them up, you know. Uniqueness. But the nicest thing is when you sit in a meeting and like nothing happens, you know. You go home and somebody will say, you know, you were recommended, you could help me. And those are the nicest people to work with because, you know, they're just willing to do anything. And the other day I had this realization that anybody who takes the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is pretty courageous. I work in a cool place. I work for a yoga school that's pretty famous. And one of those guys, Cheech and Chong, comes and does yoga with us, by the way. And, you know, like I walk kind of crooked because I'm so stiff. This woman said, I can treat what you've got going for free almost. And I look at her, I says, you're out of your mind, I don't believe you. So I'm just thinking, I said, imagine when I could tell you I know how the steps work, and do you want to get on this, on this bandwagon of mine or Alcoholics Anonymous? You got to be pretty desperately beaten up to take the steps, because I see I'm not that beaten up to go for that therapy that she promised me, for free. And I see, wow, we're really lucky that we have a method that's on the wall that will guarantee sobriety and recovery from alcohol. And for that, I'm forever grateful. And there was a girl 7 years ago that was as hopeless as me. And I was at a Friday night meeting, just happened to go there, was wearing my black leather, LA black leather, with the black cap. And she comes in and she says, I was introduced to you many years ago, but I think I'm ready. And she was as hopeless as me, because all she could do was wash a dish a day. I says, that's right. And go to a meeting, And, for this holiday season, she met such a nice guy. He took her to Hawaii. It's not that he took her to Hawaii, it's that her taste in men has changed as a result of taking the steps. And writing all those inventories. And, she calls me. She tells me how fabulous it's in Hawaii. I says, I was there too, but all I did is complain. That was me. And she says, I said, didn't that black stuff scare the hell out of you? It did of me. She says, no. I said, well, that's, I used to call every day LA. Says, this Hawaii, they're making too big a deal of it. It's all man-made. So that was my perception of Hawaii. And what's so cool? I got a plan to go for the second time to Australia in 2006 when my girlfriend had turned 15. And I know I'm going to be there. And with me, you never knew if I was going to show up somewhere, and I could never make plans because there would not ever be enough booze to get me from Brooklyn to Atlantic City even. And that was not such a long drive, because I was afraid that whatever I had on me, I might be drinking it way too fast. And by the time I got off the bus, I would know where a liquor store is. And today, even if I want water, it shows up. So I want to thank you for asking me to speak. It's been a pleasure and an honor to speak at an AA meeting in Malibu. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.